Hey guys, it's ZEVENX. We're back here for part 2 of how to construct a progressive house song in the style of Paris Bloom and tritonal. If you haven't checked out the first part of this series, I will put a link in the description and somewhere here on the screen so you guys can go back and start from there. Otherwise, we're just going to jump right into it. In the last part, we covered the drums, and so this is what we ended up with. So pretty simple, pretty basic, and typical for progressive house. And so the way I like to approach my projects is I like to make all of the elements, all the different sections and layers, all in one little area, make it nice and tight, make sure it's mixed down nice, and then I start separating and moving them around as I need to for arranging the whole song. So the next thing that we can work on is, and I usually do this at this point in the process, is make a bass line. And this bass line is going to be more of the mid-range bass line. It's very typical in progressive house to be more of the kind that you hear, not so much of like the sub bass that you get to layer for those sub frequencies. So first off, let's just start out with opening up one of my favorite synthesizers, Spire. And one of the coolest presets I have found for this kind of mid bass that we can start with is actually in the presets that come in Spire. And if we go to Drill Bass 2, it's one of my favorites. There's no real method 100% on how to start, writing your bass line necessarily. It's kind of up to you. I mean, you could start considering maybe what key you want to work in and stuff like that. But sometimes I just kind of like to mess around with a couple notes. If I hear a note that sounds good, I just start building my bass line after that. So I'm just going to mess around with a few notes and see what we come up with. But before we get started, I'm going to just label my track bass line. I like to keep my channels organized and color-coded. That way it's easy to look at and easy to move around and arrange later on. So let's just make that one green. Okay, well, let's match it with that. There we go. Okay, so let's work kind of in the second octave area. Let's just say we start with D. Let's see how that sounds. I'm probably going to have to pull down the level on this a little bit, maybe somewhere around there for now. Okay, I didn't really like that, so actually let's move it up, I think. Let's go somewhere like, let's just try, you know what, let's work in the third octave. And let's start here on A sharp. It's sounding really high. Okay, so I really like that kind of progression of the bass line where it goes like this. Okay, now the first thing I know that we're going to have to add is some side chaining. Okay, let's wait for it to load. Okay. So you can do sidechaining with a variety of different devices or methods. You can use automation with this volume right here to adjust the sidechaining and create a dip on every beat. I like to just use an LFO tool. So I'm going to apply that. It's going to go like this. Okay, let's just hear how that sounds in the mix. So it actually sounds pretty good. I think it needs a little bit more grit, so I'm going to add a Camel Crusher, and I'm going to use the British Clean, and just adjusted the mix there. I kind of want some of the highs to come out a little bit, so I'm going to get an EQ real quick and apply that a little bit. First, we're going to cut out some of the low frequencies. Let's say 75. Maybe 100. And I'm going to try and see if, let's see, plugins, HT, there we go. I really like these multi-band compressors because I can really bring out the presence of some of the frequencies specifically. Okay, so for now we're going to stick with that. Okay, that is basically the basics of how to get the bass line to sound right. This is, even if you don't have Spire or this specific synth or anything, you can try and go for whatever synth that you have. Try and just maybe find something that sounds good in the mid-range, brings out those frequencies here in the mids, and it has a nice audible presence, and it has that kind of aggression, but not too much, you know. So you can figure it out and experiment with different sounds. And I might start playing with some effects though now. I want to show you how you guys can maybe play with different sections of that bass line to make it sound a little bit more interesting. So let's go to plugins, and one of my favorites is right here, Sugar Bites, Effects Tricks. I'm going to put that over here in the beginning, and over here on vinyl, I'm just going to add one strip there. Okay, so let's adjust that a little bit. 1.4. So that kind of adds like a pitch vinyl stop effect at the end, like almost bending down. So you can play around with that, or maybe even add some reverb to widen it out. Maybe use a utility and spread out the width. Or maybe you want it in mono, you want it very direct, but I think it sounds better with a little width. So let's try 125. And eventually when we start adding more layers, you might want to use different panning techniques. But that's going to be pretty much it for this part. And then in the next one, we're going to go into the chord progression. See you guys then.